My friends, tonight, I want to speak to every heart that is a-ching to every couple who once vowed to walk together and now stand on opposite ends of a silent room. I want to speak to husbands who feel like strangers in their own homes and wives who go to bed weeping, wondering where the love went. The world is quick to give up on marriage. Society tells us, if it's broken, throw it away. But God says something else entirely. If it's broken, give it to me. I make all things new. Marriage is not a man-made contract. It is a divine covenant established by God himself from the beginning of time. In Genesis, God said, "It is not good for man to be alone." And from that declaration, he formed woman, not out of the dust, but from the rib of man, signifying equality, intimacy, and unity. She was not taken from his head to rule over him, nor from his feet to be beneath him, from his side to walk beside him. That act was more than creation. It was a sacred design, a reflection of God's own nature of relationship, unity, and love. When God brought Adam and Eve together, he didn't just create a couple. He established the very foundation of human society. He performed the first marriage ceremony and said, A man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. That was not a suggestion. It was a divine ordinance. The world treats marriage today as a fragile agreement, something based on convenience, compatibility, or emotion. But in God's eyes, marriage is a covenant, a sacred, binding relationship that involves three: the husband, the wife, and the Lord. And when God is the center of that union, the marriage has an unshakable foundation. But when he is left out, that foundation begins to crumble. God never intended for marriage to be a battlefield of pride, silence, or selfishness. He designed it to be a place of safety, unity, purpose, and unconditional love. It was meant to mirror his love for his people. Faithful, sacrificial, enduring. When a man and a woman say, "I do," they are not merely signing a paper or having a ceremony. They are stepping into a holy covenant that carries divine significance. Every vow spoken at the altar is more than poetry. It's a promise made before the Creator of the universe. For better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, those are not just poetic words. They are sacred commitments. And they were never meant to be based on feelings, because feelings change. They were meant to be anchored in God's character, which never changes. Love in marriage is not about the emotion of the moment. It is about the decision to stay committed, to serve, to forgive, and to endure. The reason so many marriages are failing today is because we have taken God out of the equation. We build our homes on romance, attraction, and compatibility. And when those things fade, we wonder what went wrong. But God never said to build your house on sand. He said to build it on the rock, and that rock is Christ. When Christ is the center of your marriage, storms may come, but the house will not fall. Trials may test you, but they will not destroy you. Because love that is rooted in God is not fragile. It is fierce, enduring, and eternal. Every successful marriage that lasts through hardship and years is not held together by mere human effort, but by divine grace. Grace that teaches you to say, "I'm sorry," when you'd rather stay silent. Grace that empowers you to forgive 70 times 7. Grace that enables you to choose love even when feelings are gone. That kind of love doesn't come from us. It comes from God. God is love. And where God dwells, love will flourish. Marriage was never meant to be carried by two imperfect people alone. It was meant to be sustained by the presence of a perfect God. That's why prayer is so important in marriage, not as a last resort, but as a daily necessity. It keeps your heart soft, your focus aligned, and your bond strong. When couples pray together, they draw closer not only to God, but to each other. And when they seek Him, they find wisdom, healing, and strength to face every challenge as one. The truth is, God has never abandoned the institution of marriage. We have. But He is always ready to restore, to rebuild, and to renew what has been broken. And when we return to His design, when we acknowledge Him as the author of our union, we begin to walk in the beauty and power of what marriage was always meant to be. It was never about just surviving together. It was about thriving, growing, and becoming a living testimony of the love of God displayed through a man and a woman joined in holy unity. Prayer is not a last resort. It is the first step in healing a broken marriage. It is the doorway that invites God into the center of the relationship where He belongs. Too often, couples wait until everything has fallen apart, until the words have wounded too deeply, until the silence has grown too loud, until hearts have grown too cold, before they finally turn to prayer. But prayer was never meant to be a desperate whisper in crisis. It was meant to be the daily breath of a marriage rooted in faith. When a husband and wife come before God in prayer, even if the wounds are fresh and the emotions are raw, they are acknowledging something powerful, that they cannot fix this on their own. And that admission is not weakness, it is wisdom. There is something sacred that happens when one or both spouses begin to pray for their marriage. Walls begin to come down. Pride begins to melt. Anger starts to lose its grip, because you cannot remain hard-hearted before God for long. In the presence of a holy, loving, and merciful God, hearts are softened. Even when your spouse seems unwilling, even when you are the only one praying, your prayers are not in vain. God hears the cry of the brokenhearted. He listens to the one who says, "Lord, I don't know what to do, but I trust you." That kind of prayer moves heaven. Prayer doesn't mean you will see immediate results. It's not a magic formula, but it is the means through which God begins to work, first in you, then in your marriage. Because more often than not, healing doesn't start with your spouse changing. It starts with you being transformed in the secret place of prayer. Starts when you lay down your need to be right, your desire for control, and your hurt, and you place them at the feet of Jesus. Prayer is not just talkering. It's surrendering. God, I give you my pain, my fears, my disappointments. I need your help. Some people think prayer is simple a solution for such a complex problem. But the truth is, most broken marriages aren't the result of one big failure. They're the result of 1,000 small wounds that were never brought to God. Resentment builds, communication dies, intimacy fades. But prayer is the invitation for God to restore what's been lost. It's the doorway to reconciliation, the space where God begins to untangle the knots that years of frustration and unforgiveness have tied. Prayer also shifts your perspective. When you begin to pray for your spouse, not just about them, but for them, something powerful happens in your heart. You stop seeing them as the enemy. You start seeing them the way God sees them. You begin to remember their worth, their pain, their humanity. And instead of blaming them for everything that's gone wrong, you start interceding for them with compassion. That shift alone can bring healing faster than any argument ever will. There are couples who have prayed for years before seeing change. There are stories of marriages on the brink of divorce that were restored because one spouse refused to give up praying. Even if your spouse has left emotionally or physically, prayer reaches where your hands cannot. It reaches into places you cannot go and works in ways you cannot see. The Bible says the prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective. That includes the broken, the desperate, and the faithful few who are standing in the gap for love that seems lost. When you pray, you are aligning your heart with the will of God. And God's will is always for restoration, healing, and peace. He is not the author of confusion, division, or strife. He desires that your marriage reflect the unity and love of Christ and the church. But for that to happen, you must first invite Him in. You must open your heart in prayer, even if your spouse is closed. You must be willing to let God change you, speak to you, and strengthen you as you wait for Him to work. Prayer creates space for grace. It makes room for miracles. It's in those quiet moments when words are few and tears flow freely that God does His deepest work. He listens, He comforts, He moves, He restores what seemed beyond repair, and He begins the sacred work of rebuilding your marriage one prayer at a time. No matter how far a marriage has fallen, no matter how deep the wounds or how wide the distance between two hearts, there is hope because there is God. What may seem impossible to man is never impossible with Him. A marriage that feels beyond saving is not beyond the reach of the one who created it. The same God who spoke the world into existence, who raised the dead, who parted seas and moved mountains, is still in the business of restoration. There is no heartbreak He cannot heal and no relationship He cannot redeem. The world may say it's too late. Family may say give up. Even your own heart may whisper that it's hopeless. But God speaks differently. He says, "Behold, I make all things new." When a marriage is broken, it often feels like the story has ended. Trust is shattered, love feels cold, and communication has collapsed into silence or conflict. It seems that what once was is lost forever. But just because something is broken does not mean it is beyond repair. In the hands of God, broken things become beautiful testimonies. Discard what is damaged. He restores it. He specializes in breathing life into dry bones. A broken marriage is not a lost cause. It is an opportunity for God to show His power and His grace. Healing in marriage does not begin with pretending that everything is fine. It begins with acknowledging the pain, the disappointment, the betrayal, and bringing it all before the Lord. God does not heal what we hide. He heals what we surrender. When both spouses, or even just one, come before God with humble hearts and open hands, the process of restoration begins. He does not need perfect people to work with. He needs willing hearts. The story of redemption has always been written with flawed people who chose to trust a flawless God. No marriage is too far gone because no heart is too hard for God to soften. He can change desires, break chains of addiction, dismantle pride, and restore communication. He can take years of resentment and turn it into renewed respect. He can take a marriage built on shaky ground and rebuild it on the solid rock of His Word. But it requires a turning. It requires a return to Him. Restoration is not a passive hope. It is an active decision to invite God into the very place that seems most broken. There are couples who have faced adultery, abandonment, abuse, financial ruin, and spiritual dryness. Yet they stand today not as survivors, but as testimonies of God's redeeming power. What made the difference wasn't their strength, but God's intervention. When God is welcomed in, nothing is too far gone. It may take time, may take tears, it may take humility and sacrifice, but God can take even the most hopeless situation and turn it into a miracle. What the